Hi friend, welcome. It's Michaela, but you can call me Mac. Today we're going to be updating my reading journal with all of the books that I read in March. Let's just jump right into it. So the first book I read in March, I actually won't be sharing the author's name, the title of the book, or the cover of the book. And that's because after I finished reading it, I realized that it was published by St. Martin's Press. And friend, you may have already heard about all the drama and the messiness that's going around with St. Martin's Press. But if you haven't, there is an ongoing boycott surrounding them. This boycott is about holding companies accountable for their actions, particularly when it comes to racism, discrimination, and other harmful behaviors. When St. Martin's Press had the chance to speak up and stand up against racism and protect BIPOC readers, authors, and reviewers, they chose not to. And that is something that I absolutely will not be supporting and cannot stand for. It's important to stand against hate speech and actions towards any group of people. I won't go into specific details here, but I do encourage you to do your own research and learn more about what the issues were that were surrounding this whole St. Martin's Press boycott. It's crucial for us as a community to kind of stay informed about these important matters and speak up on things when we feel the need to do so. Now, I do want to specifically clarify that this boycott is not about the author or their books. It's about advocating for change within the publishing industry as a whole and holding companies accountable for their actions. So, with that, let's continue to keep uplifting diverse voices and promoting inclusivity within the literary world. I know that was a lot. That was heavy right off the bat. So, with that being said, let's move on to the rest of the books that I read in March. So, one of the books I read in March was called The Measure. So, imagine this. Would you choose to know how long you'll live? It seems like just another day. You wake up, pour a cup of coffee, and you're about to head out. But today, when you open your front door, waiting for you is a small wooden box. This box holds your fate inside, the answer to the exact number of years you will live. From suburban doorsteps to desert tents, every person on every continent receives the same box. In an instant, the world is thrust into a collective frenzy. Where did these boxes come from? What do they mean? Is there truth to what they promise? As society comes together and pulls apart, everyone faces the same shocking choice. Do they wish to know how long they'll live? And if so, what will they do with that knowledge? The Measure charts the dawn of a new world through an unforgettable cast of characters whose decisions and fates interweave with one another. Best friends whose dreams are forever entwined, pen pals finding refuge in the unknown, a couple who thought they didn't have to rush, a doctor who cannot save himself, and a politician whose box becomes the power keg that ultimately changes everything. Enchanting and deeply uplifting, The Measure is a sweeping, ambitious, invigorating story about family, friendship, hope, and destiny that encourages us to live life to the fullest. I first added this book to my TBR several months ago after watching Adele Ashley's favorite books of all time video. I'll be sure to link it down below so you can go check it out. The description of this book really pulled me in, and it's also categorized as speculative fiction, which I don't really gravitate towards, but boy, was it on the nose. I was very I don't know, it made you think on such a deeper level of would you open your box? Would you not open your box? The way that different countries kind of handled the boxes, there was questions of morality and discrimination and all of that going on. It just really made you think of oh, this is such a simple, idea for a book, but it really dives deep into different people's perceptions of what this string means, people's opinions, and people's choices of opening their box or not opening their box. This story follows several, it's a whole cast of characters. Before I move on, there is one part of the book that really resonated with me. So as the synopsis mentioned, there are two pen pals, and in the letter, one of them writes, "I knew a guy in college who took a job as an investment banker. He was so worried that he would end up hating the job, but sticking around for the money. He set an alert on his phone to send him the same message every year on his birthday, to sit down and ask himself, 'Are you happy?' I think we're raised to believe that happiness is something that we've been promised, that we deserve to be happy, which is why this really messed up thing that's happening to some of us is so hard to accept because we're supposed to be happy. But the box arrived on our doorstep saying that we don't get the same happy ending as the people we pass on the sidewalk, at the movies, at the grocery store. They get to keep on living and we don't. And there's no reason why. For me personally, it's something about the idea of just seeing the string that shows you that you're either going to live a shorter life or a longer life that was really causing this panic and this flurry amongst people. Because regardless if the strings didn't exist, there are still things that are out of your control that possibly could have happened to have led to like an early death for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, regardless of if you actually saw your string or not, these things are still going to happen to you, and you're either going to live a long life or a shorter life, so on and so forth. So I don't know, again, this book just really made me think on a deeper level, and it was just really kind of interesting to see the different lives and follow different people's stories, and then just like see how everybody's life is kind of tied together. It reminds me of the word sonder, which is the realization that each random passerby is living a life just as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, family, routines. It's just like you really don't know what other people's stories really are. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my ultimate goal is just to be happy. That's what I want to be in my life. And so I really do love this kind of reminder to keep checking in with yourself every year to make sure, like, yeah, you're accomplishing this, or yeah, you achieved this, but are you actually happy where you are? I don't know. For me personally, I feel like happiness is pretty much all that matters. Anyway, this is getting really deep. Let's move on to the next book. I finally finished A Lady for a Duke. This book was so cute and so good. I've had this book on my list since last June. I also attempted to read it during my 24-hour readathon in December, and I finally just powered through and finished it, which I don't want to say powered through because that makes it sound like I didn't like it. I love this book. I thought it was super cute. I gave it 5 stars. Let me tell you what this book is about before I get into how much I loved it. When Viola Carroll was presumed dead at Waterloo, she took the opportunity to live at last as herself. But freedom does not come without a price, and Viola paid for hers with the loss of her wealth, her title, and her closest companion, Justin Duvere, the Duke of Gracewood. Only when their families reconnect years after the war does Viola learn how deeply that loss truly was. Shattered without her, Gracewood has retreated so far into grief that Viola barely recognizes her old friend in the lonely, brooding man he has become. As Viola strives to bring Gracewood back to himself, fresh desires give new names to old feelings. Feelings that would have been impossible once and may be impossible still, but which Viola cannot deny, even if they cost her everything all over again. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of historical romances because I think like the setting, the way that they talk, like it's a little bit hard for me to get into and be interested in. So I will admit, when I first was reading this, I did have that same kind of feeling, but eventually I just dove right into it because the characters' personalities are really funny, they're great. I loved all of the characters in this book. I also know that personally, I'm not a huge fan of like a slow burn, but I found something else that I'm even less of a fan of, which is slow identity reveals. Like the way that I was holding my breath and like gasping when I'm like, just tell him the truth, you know? I just, understandably, I understand why the reveal had to like build up. It's a very sensitive reveal and you never know how people are going to react, but the way that everything was handled and cared for, Gracewood, I was so in love with Gracewood. And then finally, like their relationship, Viola and Gracewood's relationship is just so beautiful. Their chemistry, their friendship, their patience with each other, they're just so beautifully like written. I'm getting all giddy just thinking about it because it's such a cute book. Anyway, I'm not gonna keep talking about this too much. I gave it 5 stars, of course. There was just this weird part at the end, which was like, why is this happening? It really didn't feel like it fit in the book, and it felt like it was a very rushed scene. And ultimately, you know, you find out like, oh, I guess I understood why this happened, but it was so weird. And it was very reminiscent of a book that I read last year called My Lady's Choosing. It was a choose your own adventure book, so you got to like flip to different pages and choose which path you wanted to read about. That was also a historical romance set in the Regency era, but it was very satirical. It was full of like comedy, and there was almost an identical scene in that book that took place at the end of this book. And so that's the only thing I could think about. And maybe that's just a me problem, but that's all I could think about when I was reading this book. And I was just like, I don't feel like this part bodes well for satire if this is supposed to be funny, or I don't know. It was just an odd choice, I thought, to kind of like speed up the ending and end the book. Ultimately, I still really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars. And for the last book that I read in March, I did a buddy read with Amanda over at Page Jedi. I'll be sure to link her channel down below so you can go check her out. We read Two Can Keep a Secret, which is like a young adult thriller mystery kind of book. Here is a quick synopsis. Echo Ridge is small town America. Ellery's never been there, but she's heard all about it. Her aunt went missing there at age 17, and only 5 years ago, a homecoming queen put the town on the map when she was killed. Now Ellery has to move there to live with her grandmother she barely knows. The town is picture perfect, but it's hiding secrets, and before school even begins for Ellery, someone has declared open season on homecoming, promising to make it as dangerous as it was 5 years ago. Then, almost as to prove it, another girl goes missing. Ellery knows all about secrets. Her mother has them, her grandmother does too. The longer she's in Echo Ridge, the clearer it becomes that everyone there is hiding something. The thing is, secrets are dangerous, and most people aren't good at keeping them, which is why in Echo Ridge, it's safest to keep your secrets to yourself. I won't talk too much about the actual book itself because with thrillers, you really just need to go into them with the bare minimum. I will say it was pretty good. It was a quick read. It was really fun to do a buddy read because like Amanda and I were just sharing our reactions and theories and opinions of the book, in real time. So it was fun to kind of like bounce, ideas off of each other. Eventually, we were kind of able to guess how it was gonna end, but it was still pretty interesting. Also, it's weird because reading the description, they never mention that Ellery is a twin. She has a twin brother, and I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it because it was just kind of cute seeing their like dynamic and seeing them together, even though he wasn't a big part of the book. So it's just interesting that the synopsis didn't mention that. Mind you, this is the first time I'm actually reading the synopsis. I didn't even know what it was about when I first picked it up. But yeah, that's all I'll say about that. I gave it 4 stars. Like, it's a very solid 4-star, not 4.1 or anything like that. Like, it's very solid 4-star because there were a few unanswered questions, I think, at the end of the book, where even when I reached out to Amanda, I was like, do you remember this being explained? And she was like, no, I don't know why that happened. So we both kind of had some moments of like, not really sure how that connects, but oh well. So yeah, anyway, it was fine. I will say Karen McManus's other book, One of Us is Lying, I think was better than this one. I think I also gave that one 4 stars, but I think the ending was just way shocking and jaw-dropping and something that I've never thought to think, or I did not guess that ending whatsoever. So I think that is what I liked about this a lot better than this one. The last thing I need to do is update my numbers challenge with Two Can Keep a Secret. Basically, I just made up this random challenge to read books that have numbers in the titles. So I'm reading books that have 1 through 9 in their titles. If you have any recommendations, let me know down in the comments. And lastly, I just need to update my March wrap-up page. My favorite book for the month was A Lady for a Duke. For ratings, I read 1 3-star, 1 4-star, and 2 5-stars. For format, I had half and half. 50% were audiobooks and 50% were print. So I read 812 pages and listened to 24 hours of audiobook. As I mentioned, I did one buddy read. My first buddy read that was not with my mom. And I wanted to draw bubble buddies, like two bubble buddies, because I couldn't think of anything else to draw here. And lastly, I will not be listing out my least favorite book of the month because of the St. Martin's Press boycott, but just know it wasn't the three that I mentioned today. Anyway, with that, here is a final flip through of all of the pages that we set up today. I'll be honest, friend, March was not that great of a reading month, and I wasn't super inspired to like create these spreads, so it took me a little bit longer to actually set this up. I did have a little bit of a slump, so I didn't read for like several days in March. I'm making a bit of progress on my numbers challenge. I also bought 3 books in March and I was gifted one, so the total came to $58.27. I also just added them to my personal library page. Still gonna hold out on filling out my book bracket, but for March, my favorite book was A Lady for a Duke, which is also a part of one of my 30 books that I want to read before my 30th birthday in October, and I gave that 5 stars. Thanks so much for being here, friend. I always really appreciate you. Check out the video right here on the left-hand side of the page to see my February reading journal wrap up, and I will see you over there. Bye.